dantrolene is a product that treats something called malignant hyperthermia. I don't expect y'all to really know what that is, but basically, very briefly, there's a very, very small percentage of our world's population that is allergic to gas anesthesia. And if you happen to be one of those unfortunate people that's allergic to gas anesthesia, what happens is your body temperature rises from 98.6 to like 115 degrees in a matter of 20 minutes and you're dead. And the only way you can save yourself is if you have this product, dantrolene. So it's for injection. So I'm trying to think where else. Oh, yes. So but this is a product that is a freeze-dried product, meaning it's in a vial, it's in a powder, and if you've got this situation where your body temperature is going up, people are frantically trying to put sterile water in these vials, shake them up to where they can be reconstituted and injected in the body to save the people's life. Well, in our case, as we were developing the product and trying to get to the point of getting a regulatory package where we could submit to the FDA, we had been running experimental batches on a small scale over at the University of Kentucky, which we can do very cost effectively. But when we had to go to the commercial manufacturer, it was literally like going to Vegas. And you're dropping, on a roulette, you're dropping $250,000 and you're watching the wheel spin. And it wasn't a 30-second wheel spin, it was about a 2-day wheel spin of doing this freeze-dry process. And let me tell you, I had multiple of these batches and we tried scaling up at $250,000 a crack, where my money just disappeared in 48 hours. And let me just tell you, that's not a fun situation to have to deal with. Another thing that was really tough is I mentioned the NIDA thing. And by the way, that, again, NIDA has to be given a lot of credit for having run that major phase 3. We were all set up. NIDA was going to fund the entire, and generally to get an FDA approval of the drug, you typically have to run 2 clinical trials, 2 phase 3s. One was run, we needed to run a second. Everything was set for NIDA. They had it in the budget for $16 million. In the time from when I signed the term sheet to when I signed the definitive agreement, which was probably like a 60-day period, unbeknownst to me, there was a filing deadline that Britannia missed. And guess what? When they missed the filing deadline, the person that was in charge of overnight over this division that had authorized the money ended up retiring, and a new person comes in who, for whatever reason, is not interested in opioids or heroin. She's interested in treating people from cocaine. And all of a sudden, they leave us at the altar with a $14 million bill to run the phase 3 that we've got to run to get lofexidine approved. Again, that was not a fun situation. To make matters worse, and I will say it, I did go out and raise some money, and I ultimately raised about $20 million. I will tell you that February of '09, still to this day, February of '09 remains the darkest day in my history of U.S. WorldMeds. I thought, though, that it was going to be the happiest day, because literally we had, after we had raised the $14 million, we had gone out and run this big phase 3 on 250 or 300 patients and got fabulous results, which we expected, because the first study, if you can imagine, if you think about what they're doing and what caused that first study to be halted, is that what they did is you will actually find it, hopefully you'll find this interesting. What they did is they found heroin addicts, brought them in off the street, put them in a locked facility where basically each patient that was enrolled was put in a locked room. They took all these patients, they hopped everybody up on 3 days of morphine to a steady state where they're really juiced up. And then if you can imagine, they randomized them. 50% went to lofexidine, which blocks your withdrawal symptoms. 50% they put them on a sugar pill. Now guess what? People that were getting lofexidine, they were all breezing through this thing, and because that's what this thing does, it's very effective. When you look at this other group that were, literally locked in the room, and they were going through massive, horrendous withdrawal pains, and And what ultimately happened, the reason why they canceled this thing, this is kind of a fascinating story in itself. It turned out they had a fatal kind of design or flaw in the protocol. The protocol is how it's designed. Where what they should have done is if somebody was experiencing terrible withdrawals, they should have allowed somebody to raise their hand and say, "Uncle, I want out," and then put them over and put them on buprenorphine or methadone or something like that. They did, and literally the protocol said you had to go through full withdrawal on your own, no help whatsoever, and that's why the Independent Monitoring Board had halted the study. Well, anyway, we had ended up running this study on 256 patients, got fabulous results. Yes, we did. We ran it more ethically. We did give people the ability, who wanted to get out, to exit and put them on methadone and run them off. And here we had this great data package. We were going to meet with the FDA with the results of 2 phase 3 clinical trials, and this thing shows this thing works. And we fly over there, we literally have champagne on ice. We're ready to pop the corks and just celebrate. And I walk out of that meeting, and I tell you, if there was a gun available, I was ready to put it to my head and blow my brains out, because while they said it was nice, they expected us to go run another even larger phase 3 clinical trial at a cost that was going to be on the order of $50 million. And which we subsequently ran and ultimately delayed our launch by 8 years. Fun, huh? Oh, by the way, February 09, let's see, how many years ago was that? It's 11 years ago. So y'all are probably too young to really remember. But February 09 is the last time Wall Street melted down. And if you think about it, when February of 09 was 90 days after Wall Street melted down, and all my investors who I just raised $20 million from, they just lost 40% of the net worth. So I'm thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to get out of this mess? Because I can't get the money for the partners. And anyway, at that point, I ended up, that's a whole nother story that I'll get into in a little bit, but it's I will talk about that a little bit. But for me, what that meant is that ultimately I went 6.5 years, lost $13 million before I got my first dollar of revenue with the dantrolene sodium, which we did get in the market, but we didn't do millions. In fact, the first year I did $1.6 million, and that was top line, not bottom line. And by the time we got to February of 09, we ended up running $20 million of losses, and it was an ugly situation. But even though things were kind of tough, I will say, for all the ugliness, that the business has done pretty well since then. And over the last 12 years, we've grown our revenues 135-fold, and ended this past year at just over 190 million in revenues. Which, by the way, has anybody even heard of U.S. World Banks? Okay, yeah. That's neat. I don't expect anybody to. We've tried to stay kind of low and under the radar, but I am pretty proud of what we've done as a company. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that. Let me tell you a little bit about the company. We were founded in 2001. We are located here in Louisville. My vision back then, as it is today, is to remain a privately held specialty pharmaceutical company. Probably what I'm most proud of, I'll just say what I am most proud of when I go back to that last graph is not necessarily that I've achieved those sales, but that 19 years into it, that we've been able to reach that level and still be a privately held business with no venture capital or institutional investors. That's something it's been really difficult to do. It's been a real challenge, but it's been something I've been real excited about. In terms of the strategy, and this kind of goes back to what I started when I talked about having to figure out how to pay for $50 million. Ultimately, what I ended up doing is I was in a deep hole, and I'll tell you exactly where I was. Is at the time, now that pops in my mind, we were doing, at February of 09, I had one product in the market. I was making about $1 million a year, but I was $20 million in debt, and I was looking at $50 million to run a clinical trial. So you all do the math. I could take 20 years to pay off my debts, which that's not a very compelling proposition, or 50 years to save up enough money to run a clinical trial, and what am I going to do? I can't get any money from my investors, so the only way I could get out of this thing was to buy my way out of the business. And at that point, the interesting thing is that while when I first started out to try to start the company by buying drugs, nobody would really take me seriously. The interesting thing is while we were in debt and only had one product in the market, we had run a big phase 3 clinical trial. We'd achieved some success. We built a little bit of an enterprise, and people started believing in us, and we ended up going out and completed one acquisition where we bought a business that, well, this is kind of a fascinating story in itself. We ended up buying a product called MyoBlock, which I don't consider you to necessarily know what that is, but it's a drug that competes against Botox. Most of y'all have probably heard of Botox. Okay. MyoBlock is a botulinum toxin. It can be used cosmetically, but that's off label and I can't promote it. Otherwise I can get fined by our friends in the government. But it treats something called, well, anyway, it's a drug that we ended up acquiring. This is kind of a funny story in itself because we've been looking at a lot of different opportunities. And anyway, this opportunity came to me, and my partner walked in, laid it on the table, and he showed me, laid me the financials and said, this thing just came across my desk, why don't you take a look at it? But he basically dismissed me because as I looked at the financials on the income statement over the prior, I think, 5 years, it had lost $100 million. Been losing $20 million a year. Maybe it's 4 or 5 years. $20 or $25 million a year it was losing. And he just walked out thinking this is a waste of time. And then I turned over the page to the assets. And I looked at the assets and I saw that this thing had a book value of $100 million. And I knew we could buy it for $30 million. So I walked into my partner, I walked down the hall to my partner's office and I said, we're taking this down. I think he thought I had 3 heads, but the way I looked at it is that if we could buy $100 million worth of assets for $30 million, we'll figure out how to make money. And so sure enough, we levered up. Even though we was $20 million in debt, levered up another $30 million, went and bought this drug. And that really is the genesis of that big curve that ultimately ended up with us acquiring another drug. And then ultimately, we got to the point where back in 2012, 13, and 14, we were making about $15 million a year, and yet we were very concentrated in 1 or 2 products and potentially exposed to some competition. And I said, we got to get out. We got to fix this thing. And that's when I instituted what I call my watermelon through the garden hose strategy, where this was kind of a fascinating. Like I said, I'm full of stories today. When we got to the point where we were finally making a lot of what I considered a fair amount of money, $15 million a year, and we're kind of like, well, where are we going to invest our money? I was asking them about the various pipeline opportunities. Well, it turns out that we had 3 or 4 opportunities that we were looking at, but as fate might say it, the ones that were going to have the biggest revenue potential, they were going to take the longest and cost the most money. The ones that were going to be the least amount of money and can be approved the fastest were going to be the ones that had the least upside potential. And when I asked them, well, which ones are going to get approved, nobody could tell me. So I was like, okay, well then let's just do them all. And that began this, because if you can't figure out which ones are going to happen, let's do them all, and hopefully we'll have a reasonable hit. And because we had tried to acquire several other products during about a 3-year period, and even though we had acquired 2 and were making a lot of money, we hadn't been able to acquire any others. And that's when I said, well, if we can't buy our way out, we're just going to invest heavily into our own R&D pipeline. And just to give you some idea, this watermelon through the garden hose strategy, what this has meant for our company now over the past, what will end up being about 5 years, is we have invested about $250 million. Think about that, $250 million to successfully develop 7 drugs. And the fascinating thing for me is that if I'm real honest, when we began this thing, I figured, if half these things hit and they hit and generated the revenues expected, we'd be golden. Well, so I'm sitting here today, I'm here to tell you folks, every single product that we have put through the pipeline, it's almost unheard of. We have been able to get approved. It's either approved or is pending approval. And so this is what we've been working on short term. I would say we are currently marketing 6 products, including Lucimera, which is the opioid drug. We did get approved. It was launched in the fall of 2018. The longer-term vision or strategy, I guess, is, if you will, is to secure mutually beneficial long-term partnering arrangements where we leverage our successful track record and privately held status, which for a lot of partners is very important, because what we've been able to successfully do is get tied in with predominantly European international companies that want to bring their drugs to the U.S. They don't have the footprint, and for them to know that they can deal with a privately held business with people they trust and have a good successful track record, that's something that's important to them, and has worked out pretty well for us. So, why do people want to, or let's talk about why do people want to partner with us? I will say that we have transactions now completed with 3 companies. Britannia is a British company that I mentioned that had lofexidine, or excuse me, dantrolene sodium for injection. Interestingly enough, Britannia ended up getting sold to a big company in Germany called Stada, and Stada had another drug, and because of our successful track record, they actually brought it to us, and we did very well with that. We have a partnership in place with LFB. It's a big French-owned company. That's their main core business is in plasma, but we did a deal with them on a couple drugs in the hemophilia business, and kind of similarly, because of what we've done there, they've come back to us already. We're working on a drug that potentially could be competing with Humira, which is, happens to be the largest drug in the world. And then Zambon is an Italian family-owned business. They're 3rd generation. They're doing about $1 billion of sales, and that's gone pretty well for us as well. Where we are in the watermelon through the garden hose is, we have lofexidine that we've launched, Cellnorm, which is a product that we got approved, and I'll come back to this in a minute, that we ended up selling to Alpha Sigma. We just got approved for MyoBlock, which is the Botox drug, even though we're approved for something called cervical dystonia. We got it approved for something called dry mouth, and we're now actively promoting that. We've got a big hemophilia drug that we hopefully will have approved on April the 10th. That's the action date. And then we're getting ready to file for another approval of continuous infusion. And then this is right now the bulk of our pipeline, and actually we're in discussions right now to potentially acquire a couple other drugs. So it's just an ongoing process. Why do people want to partner with us? I think I've shared a little bit. I think the fact that we're agile, entrepreneurial, we embrace complexity. We have a proven track record, and I think this is probably what's really made the difference for us, and why we've been able to do what we've been able to do, is because we have been able to take, in the case of MyoBlock, that had actually been in 2 different companies' hands, and one went bankrupt, and the other just didn't make any money. And then the Apicin product, that was in the hands of 3 different companies that weren't able to do anything with it, and we were able to take these 2 drugs and make them good commercial successes where 5 other companies had failed, and that means a lot. Just today, as we were talking about the hemophilia drug, I'll tell you that Lee and I were talking about, if this thing gets approved, we're going to be looking to launch this thing, and we started talking about the strategies, and it was kind of funny because I didn't even realize this was on the slide when I was pulling it up. I kind of recycled some of these things, but we looked at each other and we said, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and make it happen, because this is kind of our motto: is failure is not an option. If it takes us getting on the road and calling on clients and trying to get this thing sold in, we're going to make it happen. And I think another reason why people do business with us is we really have a long-term perspective, willing to invest today for the benefit down the road. For what it's worth, I talked about starving a little bit. One of the reasons I've been able to raise a lot of money for my partners is, at least in the early days, is I told them that I would not put myself on the payroll until the business could afford it. And I'm a man of my word. I didn't know what I was signing up for, because I'm here to tell you that from when I started the business to when I finally was able to put myself on the payroll, that meant I went 10 years without drawing a W-2. And that was on top of me putting millions of dollars into the business. So with that, talked about some of the earlier challenges. Y'all be interested in hearing some of the more recent challenges? These are not pleasurable, let me tell you. let's start with the first one. Does anybody know anything about the OIG? Does that ring a bell? Okay, I never even heard of it. When my partner, our chief operating officer, walks into my office on Valentine's Day, I'll never forget this, Valentine's Day 2014. We're all getting ready to take flowers to our spouses and celebrate a nice thing. And it turns out, I'm glad they didn't come to me, but they went to Lee, and there were apparently a couple of, I don't know if they were even sheriffs or whatever, but men in uniform that weren't happy people that were dropping a subpoena on, a blanket subpoena on my chief operating officer, and Lee came in and had this horrid look on his face, and I don't think if I'm really honest, I don't think I ever really fully understood it until about 3.5 years later. All I knew is that we were spending about $1 million a year in legal bills alone. They were, ultimately, I'm told that they subpoenaed, I think, on the order of 2 million documents out of our company. They were interviewing countless of our employees, salespeople, sales management, Lee, although I will say in the 4.5, 5 years till beginning to end, I was not interviewed once. I think that, I believe that's because they didn't have anything. I mean, I didn't do anything. People that get back $125,000 don't cheat people. People that go 10 years without drawing a paycheck don't cheat people. I wouldn't cheat anybody. But it turns out they were out calling on our, basically subpoenaing our top prescribers and ran half of them off where they wouldn't even prescribe our drug anymore. And then all of a sudden they finally get to the point where, and by the way, what the OIG is, it's something called the Office of Inspector General. And what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to make sure that everybody follows the rules. I guess in all businesses, but in our particular case in the pharmaceutical business. And one of the things that they're supposed to do, and I mentioned MyoBlock can be used off-label like Botox to take care of wrinkles. You can't do that. That's the type of stuff that will get you in jail, or put you in jail, or have massive fines. And to give you an idea, Allergan, and since I mentioned Botox, Allergan, if y'all do a little Google search, you will probably see that they actually had to pay, I think it was about a $600 million fine, because they had this broad effort where, I'm not sure the right term, but this was a systemic, orchestrated effort where they had their sales reps promoting Botox off-label before they got the indication to treat migraine headaches, where they were doing injections, and by the way, they ultimately got approved. But what they had done is by going out and having this plan where they were backhandedly promoting off-label, they were able to get Botox up to doing $500 million in sales. And in the pharmaceutical world, they ended up paying a $600 million fine, which frankly, for them, when you were generating $500 million a year, generating probably $400 million in profit, a year and a half to get $500 million in sales was probably worth it. In our case, when they finally came back to us, and I guess laid their facts of what they were going to come to us and get us for, you say it again, their purpose is to make sure that people follow the rules, and if they're not following the rules, what they're looking to find people for is if you have systemic problems, where the senior management is directing activities. Okay?
Refer to sometimes as tone at the top.
So they finally come in, like 4.5 years later, we'd spent $4.5 million, and we actually spent a whole lot more that I'll talk about. Well, I'll go ahead and mention this now. We had a 10%. By the way, to fund $250 million, I wasn't making $250 million. So what we ended up doing is we ended up going out and borrowing. I had gone out and just borrowed $125 million that I had access to draw up to. I think I'd only drawn about $50 million at the time, but I had a 10% loan, which I felt we were very comfortable in being able to pay 10% on. When you're making $15 million a year, if you can pay 10% on $50 million, that's $5 million a year. That made a lot of sense to be able to leverage to go up and try to expand bigger things. Well, when this OIG letter comes dropped in, this subpoena, what's my lender do the first time he sees it? He says, "Give me my money back. This is black hole. I don't know what you could be sued for. It could be hundreds of millions of dollars." So we were in a quandary because we couldn't. I mean, the government wasn't talking to us. So I had to go out and refinance it. Well, guess what? I had 72 days to get the thing refinanced, which I got refinanced. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying 10%, I ended up paying, all in, it's closer to 18%. Okay, so about that $100 million, I go from paying 10% up to 18%, so that's an extra $8 million a year, which, by the way, with the OIG investigation that goes on for 5 years, you do the math on that, that's $40 million of extra interest just alone I'm having to pay to deal with that on top of the legal bills. And so we're getting close to the end. I've got $35–40 million invested in this thing, and they come in finally with their allegations of wrongdoing, and they cited 2 of our 220 employees. One of the employees, it turns out, about the time that these allegations come in, we come to find out is embezzling money from our company. Just to give you an idea, I'm not making this stuff up. This happens to be a fellow who, just to give you an idea of how he was embezzling money, he was going out, and all of our employees, all of our salespeople all have company credit cards, and they have to, they use credit cards that are doing whatever they do for gas or expenses, and then they have to file an expense report for the bills as they come in. Well, this person was submitting the expense reports, and as they were matching up to the invoices, there were extra charges that were on there, and he was saying that these aren't my charges. My credit card's been hacked. Call American Express and tell them to take it off. So of course, our accounting, by the way, and I don't, at my level, I don't even see this stuff. This is accountant's doing this.
This is completely independent of what OIG was saying about the same guy.
Yeah, completely independent of what OIG is saying. But the point is that there was one charge on there that was like $6,000 or $7,000 for this, like the Hyatt or Hilton in Hawaii, Honolulu. And he was like, no, this wasn't mine. And when we fought it, it turns out that the hotel had a little camera when the guy was signing in, and we actually had his picture on the face. And when we had that, we bring it to his attention, and before we knew anything, he resigns. That's employee number 1. Employee number 2, and I can't even tell you exactly what he did, but I'm sure he probably was spending money on physicians doing more than what he should have done. The second employee was a female up in New Jersey who called on, she had a territory that included New York City, and it turns out that one of our top reps, and I'll fully acknowledge, of our biggest product, it was based in New York, and this rep and this doctor had become very good friends. And unbeknownst to anybody in the company, she was taking her out to dinner 2 or 3 times a month, putting her on the credit card, but instead of writing her name, because our processes say you can't take a physician to dinner more than once every quarter or something, or whatever. I can't even tell you what it is, but certainly no more than once a quarter. She was basically falsifying, saying that she was taking other doctors to dinner. Well, the way our thing is set up is reps all have managers who actually report to national sales manager, and you would have thought that the managers, their job is to be checking people's expense report. And some of this stuff, you can't make up some of this. Sometimes you can't even make up these stories. Well, it turns out that her manager, who was married, turned out, guess what? He's having an affair with this girl, and as you can imagine, if he's having an affair with this girl that's falsifying documents, would you be checking her expense reports? Very well, no. And anyway, so that's what they came to us on. There was also something else called a patient assistance fund that we were involved with, which I don't think was very minor. But the point is, this was not a systemic problem. We had 2 people that were clearly cheating the system. This was not orchestrated by anybody above. It was, everybody, hopefully not everybody has cheats, but it's not unusual to have somebody doing bad things in a company. But when we heard about this, Lee and I were like, great. We don't like it. I hate the fact that we've spent $35 or $40 million on interest, but you know what? This is pretty small. We'll probably wrap it up for $2 or $3 million and be done with it.
You fired 3 people? All 3 people go?
Well, it was only 2, but yes, 2 of them, both of them ended up resigning. So anyway, and Lee has been working with them the whole time, and Lee goes to meet with this person when the person really wants to talk the penalties. And Lee said in the first meeting, the person said he wants $130 million. And we're like, you've got to be kidding. And anyway, and I won't details, but suffice to say, within a matter of weeks, they had come down to like $36 million. And at that point, we're like, no way, you know, when you got two people that cheat like this, and you can prove it, we'll fight it. You'll get lawyers, we'll use Bill Strange, you know, his firm, we'll fight this thing. Well then, and I'll tell you what, the thing that the best represents what happens, y'all probably, if y'all follow the USC's or the college scandal thing, Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin, that is what the OIG, I mean, just think about what they did. Felicity Huffman, they've really done something bad, I guess they have. But Felicity Huffman, she goes in and she pleads guilty, and I guess she gets a misdemeanor and 2 weeks in jail, 10 days. I think she got out in early in 10 days, 14 days, she gets out in 10 for good behavior. And Lori Loughlin says, I'm gonna fight it. Well, what do they do to Lori Loughlin who decides they want to fight it? It's no longer a misdemeanor, they put felony on it. And so now, instead of facing 2 weeks in jail, she's looking at 20 years. Well, basically, when we told the FDA or the OIG that we're going to take them to court, you know what they did? They went to Lee and said, if you don't settle, we are suing you and Breck, me, individually, both civilly and criminally. And here, they haven't even interviewed, in 4.5 years, they haven't interviewed me one time. Now, you want to know what really stings me? We came to find out about the time this whole thing is coming to be settled, that this turns out to be a whistleblower case. I'm like, whistleblower, this is interesting. Let's roll the clock back a little bit. 2009, when I told you we're $20 million in debt, making $1 million a year, $50 million to run the clinical trial. I got to buy my way out of it. We had 12 employees in the company. The first deal we bought, Maya Block, we paid $30 million. Remember the $100 million asset? That a plant they were operating in Southern California that had like 50 they had about 50 employees, and then they had a corporate headquarters in Malvern, Pennsylvania, another 35 employees. They had 85 employees. And we're taking this company down, 12 people running a company of 85, and we're taking it down. First thing we had to do is we had to take the costs out of the system. The beauty of the business is that not only did it have $100 million worth of assets, but it had been staffed to be generating $300 million in revenues when it was only generating $30 million in revenues. And what we needed to do is we needed to get in and right size the business. By the way, among the other stupid things that they had done before they went into bankruptcy, when they needed to cut costs, the first thing they did is they cut the sales force. Well, let me just say a little lesson. If you're trying to sell a product, you don't cut the sales force. Sales force is who you cut last. But they cut the sales force and they kept all the overheads. And so what we needed to do is we needed to go in and cut all the overheads that they should have cut to begin with. And then we had to put a field force in. But guess what? 12 people can't right size an 85-person company and launch a field force. So we hired a company called Quintiles. Quintiles was actually, remember I talked about being in the contract sales organization protocol? Quintiles was a contract sales organization that happened to be a lot bigger than Protocol. They were doing, maybe on the order of, well, they actually did clinical research, but it was like a multi-billion-dollar company. So anyway, we hired them on a contract basis and actually put them in place to run our field sales. And technically, this period during which they were bringing these allegations against us was a period when Quintiles, we weren't even running the field force. It was being run by this independent company, Quintiles, which, by the way, I will say it's a sidebar. We're now suing them, Quintiles, because it was under their watch. Well, it turns out, and you can't even make this stuff up. The whistleblower was Quintiles' national sales director, whose job it was to make sure everything was being run compliant. And yes, oh, by the way, and I will tell you this, when they do come in and threaten you to go, and they didn't tell me I was looking at 20 years like Lori Loughlin is, but all I know is that when they were coming after me, both civilly and criminally, and they were going to be suing me personally, even though I'd made a bunch of money, I wasn't going to be losing all my personal net worth, and we ended up having to settle this thing, and and I know it was in the papers here. It absolutely galled me to sign this thing, but we ended up having to settle this thing for $17 million. It's just wrong. I mean, I can't even it's just flat wrong. But folks, that is how our government does work, and it's just what we have to deal with. So that's a relatively recent change. Another thing, and I started getting to this, and then I realized I was covering this here. Lucimera. Payer challenges. I got a couple different stories to say here. Y'all been hearing the news. I mean, you've heard something about we've been hearing, you've been hearing about opioids lately, but what have we been hearing the most about?
Right now?
Coronavirus.
Yep.
And today, in fact, I just saw in the paper we had six people have died of coronavirus. And I'm not putting down coronavirus. I'm sure it's bad, but I want y'all to realize that over the past 12 months, 70,000 people have died in the United States from drug overdoses. In fact, one of my real estate partners' brother-in-law, who's 40 years old, he and his wife were both addicts, and they've had kids. And anyway, his brother-in-law just died here recently of a drug overdose. And this is from a very prominent family, and it's just sad. But the point is it affects everybody. I mean, the poorest of poor people to the wealthiest people. It affects everybody. And here I'd spent, ultimately to get Lucimera approved, if you do the math, we spent $75 million and ultimately 15 years to get this drug approved, recognizing we had 5 years of patent protection, but we thought that this was going to be a big drug and could really help a lot of people. Well, as we got this drug approved and we were really realizing the full market potential, we actually stumbled across an opportunity where a relatively large pharmaceutical company called Bosch, y'all have heard of Bosch and Lomb, they actually had a big division called Salix that had a field force that were looking for some other drugs to be promoting. And long and the short is we ended up cutting a deal with them where they ended up paying us $20 million for the right to co-promote the drug, where we would do a revenue share. And in addition to paying us $20 million, we'd always planned to hire 30 reps that we were going to use to call on addictionologists. But there are a massive amount of opioid prescriptions that are written by primary care physicians, and they were calling on primary care physicians, and they were willing to co-promote it because they had 350 reps. So think about it. We're talking to Bosch. They're going to write us a $20 million check. In addition, our 30 reps are going to put 350 reps out there promoting the drug. We're negotiating this contract, and I kid you not, in addition to the 20 million and the revenue share, we had these milestones where if we got the revenues up to 100 million threshold, they would write us another $10 million check, or 20 million, 200 million, 300 million, and I kid you not, we got to the point where we were arguing over whether or not this was if they were going to pay us a milestone at 500 million revenues or 600 million revenues, because it's just that big. I mean, there are millions of patients out there. And they ultimately put their hammer down and said, I'm not going to pay it 600, but I will pay it 500. And we said, sold, and we did the deal. So we got the thing approved, we cut the deal, we started promoting the thing. But it turns out that the landscape for pharmaceuticals today is a little different than it was about 5 or 10 years ago. There's these entities called PBMs and the payers that have just taken a very different perspective on things. Where in the old days, if a drug was approved, insurance companies just paid for it. They paid whatever it is. Today it doesn't work that way. Or what it used to be is they would pay for everything. They'd see if the drug is helping people's lives, and if it did, they would let it go. If it wasn't doing as much compared to other drugs, they might come back and try to negotiate the price. Well, today, folks, it's completely different. The insurance company's perspective is we're not paying anybody anything. And until you show me data that shows it works in the market, or unless you're somebody like a Pfizer or Merck or Novartis, and you've got so many drugs that are going through them that you can go say, if you don't cover this drug, where I'm paying you a rebate of XYZ on this whole portfolio, if you don't cover this one, I'm going to cut your rebate. Not pay you as much money. And so they got the leverage. Well, in our case, we're going out there and trying to get payers, and we can't get anybody to cover the drug. And by the way, our whole focus, because we had these 350 reps and thinking it's going to be 500 million, is we went after all the commercial payers. And I kid you not, we, got to the point where, and I'll pick on Humana a little bit. I don't know if any Humana people around here, hopefully not, but I actually have one of my shareholders, a pretty high level individual, and I was expressing some frustration, and I said, can you help me at least get in? And I didn't expect him to get necessarily coverage, but I wanted the door to get open. And I went in and was able to meet with one of the top people, and I won't name the person's name, but one of the top people in the reimbursement. And I will tell you, walking out of there, I was stunned, because what I came to realize walking out of there is that Humana, at the end of the day, you think that their job is to cover their, what I'll call members, people that buy insurance from them. You think their job is to make sure that they get the drugs they need to protect them. But walking out of there, I came to realize that they have one job and one job only, which is maximize the return for their shareholders, and they're not going to pay for anything they don't have to. And that was really, folks, I'm here to tell you, that was a real wake-up call. And 18 months later, I'm going to be the first to admit, we've basically thrown up our hands. I mean, Salix or Bosch, they realized, they weren't getting any sales. Instead of doing 40 million, 40 million we thought we'd do last year, we did, I think, 10. We had plans to do like 80 million this year or 100 million, and I think our target's to do 20. And they've walked. Let me just tell you, you can't have 350 reps working on a drug and only do $10 million in sales. It just does not work. And they end up walking away from it, and we've come to realize, unfortunately, that the commercial market just isn't going to cover these drugs. And what we're taking a completely different track, which we're now going to go after the Medicare, Medicaid, and that's a whole long, involved process of calling on every state individually, one-on-one, and it's probably going to take us 6 months to a year to get coverage that we need. I think we're going to get it, but it's really disappointing. When you think about literally the press that Corona's getting, 6 people dying, and you realize 70,000. That's more people dying in 1 year from opioids than all the Vietnam War, and you can't get people to cover it. It's just not, that's just not right either. I mentioned some of the products in our pipeline. Because of Zelnorm, by the way, that's a fascinating story in itself, which I'm telling you, we were so excited about this. Because Zelnorm is a drug that we found out about. Actually, one of my other partners, he heads R&D. He had stumbled across this opportunity because when he worked at Procter & Gamble, they had a big product in the GI space. It was selling about $1 billion a year, and he knew of this drug called Zelnorm, which when it was launched, this thing just took off like a rocket ship. It was heading towards $1 billion, and when it was $400 million, Novartis ends up abruptly pulling it from the market. And by the way, 400 million tracked into $1 billion, and with the type of margins we're talking about, just tell you, this drug was making a lot of money and stood to make a massive amount of money.
Right?
That treats irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. Yeah. But the story here is that, again, I may sound like I'm bouncing around, but hopefully you do find this of interest. The reason this came about really has to do with a drug that Merck had called Vioxx. And I don't expect any of y'all to know Vioxx either, but Vioxx, put it this way, if you brought my chief scientific officer in from University of Kentucky, which by the way, he still works with me, he's 83 years old, and he's just spry as can be, and he's just a fabulous guy. He's from Greek, so everything's, the Greek root of this, if you've seen Bridget, that's not Bridget Jones, that's
My Big Fat
Greek Wedding. Yeah. He is just like the father in every respect, except he doesn't use Windex, but he's talking about the Greek root of this and that. But if you had George here right now, he would tell you Vioxx is one of the best drugs ever developed and should be on the market. Vioxx is a painkiller, one of the most effective painkillers, which by the way, if this was on the market, arguably maybe you wouldn't have as many people on opioids, because anyway, this was extremely effective, but apparently in the rush to market, they didn't put everything, all the side effects of some of the bad things it could do in the label, and it turns out that I think maybe a couple people died, and sometimes that happens. Maybe 1 out of 100,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000 might die, and there might have been a couple people that died. Well, anyway, all these lawsuits, plaintiffs' lawyers. I realize I've got to watch out for the crowd I'm talking to. But anyway, they went after Merck, and there were billions of dollars of cases because this thing just had huge impact, and they ended up pulling it from the market. Even though if you talk to George, he would say that drug should be on the market, one of the best drugs that's ever developed, and should be treating people today. Well, with Merck having paid those big fines and all the plaintiffs' lawyers coming after him, when Novartis found out that there was a little scare with Zelnorm, they yanked it from the market. Well, the fascinating thing there is that didn't stop the lawsuits from coming, and the lawsuits kept coming after Novartis, but what they ended up going in as part of the defense, they had to put up a defense. They ended up doing this research and found out that these claims that people had were not related to the drug. The drug was actually safe, it worked. So, and yet they decided not to reintroduce the drug because Novartis is doing, I don't know, $30 billion a year in sales, and why do they want to try to relaunch a $400 million drug? It's kind of like, and that's when we got the idea, well, you know what, maybe we can get our hands on this drug Zelnorm and reintroduce it. So yeah, we go ahead, and that's part of the watermelon that the garden knows. We actually acquired from Novartis. We pay them a reasonable amount of money, and we agreed to pay them an ongoing royalty, and we went through the whole process to get the drug approved. And right about the time we get the drug approved is when we're coming to realize that Lucemera, we can't get coverage from everybody. By the way, the reason why we can't get coverage from everybody on Lucemera is that if you think about it, there are literally millions of patients. And what they're looking at is exposure when you got millions and millions of patients that they could be paying $1,000 a year or $1,000 per script on. That could be billions of dollars of revenue, and they don't want to pay it. Now, if it was a pediatric oncology drug, which by the way, we're looking at something like this now, or let me take the hemophilia drug that I said we're about to get approval on. There are only 500 patients that have that disease a year, and if they don't get it, they bleed out and die, and they cover that stuff. And you get that covered.
I had a question about the Lucemera. The news article that I had read was talking about an alternative that had only gotten through 2 of the
Clonidine.
Clonidine.
Yeah, clonidine is a antihypertensive drug that has not been studied and does not have the indication for treating. It has some of the it delivers some of the benefits, but because it has, number one, it has not been studied, nobody knows how to dose it. The bigger problem with, you're asking about it, so I'll get into some of the history. Lofexidine, interestingly enough, was developed as an antihypertensive. Antihypertensive, for anybody who doesn't know, is for people that have high blood pressure, and it drops your blood pressure. Clonidine, they're both in the same class of drug, but they're different drugs, was a very effective antihypertensive that drops your blood pressure. Well, guess what? When you're on opioids in themselves drop your blood pressure. So when you put a patient on clonidine, you run the risk of bottoming them out their blood pressure where they can die, which requires most people who use clonidine to do it in an inpatient setting where they're monitoring the blood pressures. And the most important thing is since they haven't been studied, you don't even know how much to give it. You kind of have to do a tapering. Lucemera, on the other hand, was developed as an antihypertensive, found to be very safe in the 70s when it was developed, but guess what? It turned out it didn't drop your blood pressure. So guess what? They didn't take it in the market. That's when Britannia got a hold of the drug, figured it didn't drop your blood pressure, but it could be used to help do opioid detoxification. That's when we did all the studies. We found out exactly how to label it, and we can actually go to the market, and this is a drug that patients can use to detoxify in their own home as opposed to going into a lockdown hospital where you've got 2 or 3 times the price. But the insurance companies don't care because all they're looking at is what's my drug cost.
Yeah.
They're not talking to the other part of the equation that says, oh yes, it may cost you $1,000 to pay the insurance cost, but if you do that, you could save $15,000 from having them in a detox center, but they don't think that way. All they're looking at when we go to the silo is that piece. But the point I'm getting at on Zelnorm is when you talk about people that have irritable bowel syndrome problems, there are millions of people there as well. We knew, especially with all the problems we're having here, we were going to have problems here, and we didn't even try. we decided we're gonna be better off to sell the thing. It was painful to do it because we spent a long time, but it was pretty fortuitous because we ended up selling it to a European company that paid us $36 million for it. I think we had about 15 in it, so we made $20 million. But interestingly enough, they put it out in the market last summer. We get ongoing royalties, and I think they have like 80 reps that are promoting the drug. In the fourth quarter, they are having the exact same problem we have zero coverage. And I think in the fourth quarter, they did $1 million worth of revenues with 80 reps. I mean, we actually did more with Lucimere with no coverage with 30 reps than they did with 80 reps. And anyway, it's just a real product. The whole landscape out there is really bad. And then just overall dollars required to launch drugs. It used to be once you spend the money to get the drugs approved, they'd kind of sell themselves, and it's just not like that at all. It's just a war. But with all the horror stories I've been telling you, I will say that our drugs, I'm proud of the fact of what our drugs do. In fact, just this past week, I'll read a note. My head of operations was out in Arizona, and he ended up going in the field with one of the reps who was telling the story how he had just met with a prescriber, and apparently this text I received said a prescriber has just pulled through his first Medicaid script and said the patient called him to tell him Lucimere was literally a miracle. This patient had told the physician that if it didn't work, he was going to kill himself. And needless to say, the prescriber and the nurse today are believers in Lucimere and have said that they're going to help us try to achieve the state Medicaid approval where this situation happens. So that's pretty neat when, for all the trials and tribulations, when you hear about drugs doing that for people. This is, what I'm going to show you in a second is a video of our lead product that's called Apokyn. It's a drug it's used to treat Parkinson's. I don't know if anybody has any family members or friends that have Parkinson's disease, but it's really debilitating. And the neat thing about this is, this drug, literally can do kind of what Jesus would do. It's like making crippled people walk, blind people see. This is a video to give you an idea of what Lucimere can do, just for some perspective. This is a patient who is experiencing what's called an off episode, meaning his motor skills are impaired. And you're going to be able to, and actually, you're going to see him testing some motor skills before an injection, and then a nurse is going to get on and say it's for labeling purposes. But I'm here to tell you, you're going to see the difference 6 minutes after an injection of what this drug does for patients. So let me see if I can do this.
Let's join Ken for a doctor's visit to see how Apokyn works for him. We'll see how he responds to a special test of motor function, both during an off episode and after treatment with Apokyn. As you will see, his symptoms are quite significant. But Apokyn has been proven effective for off episodes in a wide range of patients, including those with minimal disability.
Now, if you would, sir, hold your hand straight out in front, and then touch my finger and then your nose. All right, sir. Well, let's do this then. Let's take your right hand and tap your fingers, big and as wide as possible. You'll notice how he tends to be very slow. Let's try the other hand. Same thing. Good. Then take both hands like this and rotate rapidly in a circle as much as you can and as quickly as you can.
All at the same time.
Yes, sir. Again, you can really easily see here the asymmetry where the right hand is clearly slower and has less excursion than the left, but both are clearly abnormal and very slow. Just like that, my friend. Let's see you stand up if you can. And if you can't, I'll help you, so don't worry. Okay, good. Go ahead and straighten up and let your hands relax at your side. And let's see if you can walk here in the office.
Are you close?
I'm right here with you. Notice the tremor of the hand when he's walking. We call that an overflow tremor. He can't seem to get those feet to go very far forward.
It's been about 20 minutes since Apokyn was injected. Let's see how Ken is doing now.
Touch my finger and then your nose as quickly as you can, so we can see his speed has improved. Let me have you take your right hand and tap your finger like this, real wide and fast. Take both hands and go like this for me. Rotate them through a circle, all the way
That was
around,
a hard one.
big and fast. And just like that, sir, stand up for me. Good, hands at your side, and let's walk.
Yeah.
I still get chills. I just got chills again. It's pretty neat when you got drugs that can do that. But anyway, I've kind of gone through, there are a lot more stories I can tell, but hopefully you get an idea when I say successful entrepreneur is one who is irrationally committed to his or her, the success of his or her enterprise. Hopefully that gives you some idea of what I'm talking about, at least put some real stories behind the definition. Let's talk a little bit about, what's involved in getting a business going, how to get it done. You hear people talk about business plans. I certainly believe in business plans, but I'm here to tell you they're only good for about 30 days. And I talk about hitting the wall. It happens all the time. To steal a phrase out of Nike, you just got to do it. You're going to have to. I think I already mentioned this at first. When you don't know anything about a business, the key is to surround yourself by people that know a whole lot more than you do about something. The worst entrepreneurs are the people that think they know everything, and they can bring people in and think they can tell them what to do, or yes people. You don't, believe me, you do not want yes people. You want people that know more than you do, that know what needs to be done. Surround yourself by doers, people that are going to make things happen. Great financial partners, folks. I think I've given you. It's pretty clear that. I mentioned raising $75,000 from some partners up front. As I'm sitting here today, I probably have raised, I can't tell you the exact number, but I'm fairly certain it is on the order of about $40 million, if you can believe it, from friends and family. And that probably is, I would have to say, it's a pretty significant accomplishment. But
How many shareholders do you have?
about 120, I think. But to do that, it requires being honest. It requires integrity. You've got to have strong communications, and it's not just sharing the good news, but the bad news, and more importantly, do what you say you're going to do. And key to success is have what I call the 3 Ps: persistence, passion, and patience. I will tell you right now, in fact, when I think about having won the Vote Fund Award and getting that money initially, they were calling me into all these meetings where they having all these entrepreneurs, and it seemed like I'm not going to get into names, but there were a lot of people that were got their names in the paper a whole lot more than me, and they were all about getting their names in the paper, faces in the paper, and getting the press, and instead of focusing on business. And none of those people are around anymore. It's let me tell you, it's not about getting your name in the paper. It's about doing what you need to do to be successful. What I'll tell you right now is probably in anything you're doing, you can't do 10 different things well. Focus on only 2 or 3 things and do them right. I've already said it several times, but be ready to hit the wall. When you hit the wall, you don't stop. And in fact, that probably the maddest I ever got at one of my employees was when something, I can't even remember what it was that went wrong, but when something went wrong and he just said, I can't get it done. And I don't blow my stack often, but I blew my stack and I said, don't you ever tell me something can't be done. Anything can be done. It's just a matter of how much money and how long it's going to take. And in this particular, using the analogy of hitting the wall, it's just unacceptable to say you're going to stop if you hit the wall. You got to figure out how to go over it, under it, around it, or if you have to, go through it. Again, don't accept it can't be done. It's just a matter of how much. Remember, it is going to, whatever it is you start, I'm just here to tell you right now, it's going to take you a whole lot longer. Remember, I thought I'd had my first drug in the market in 18 months. It took me 6.5 years. I mean, it's going to take you a lot longer. It costs you a lot more money. And remember, one of the last things I mentioned, which was one of the compelling reasons to start the business, make sure you have fun, spend time with your family, go to your kids' soccer games. I've got a senior in high school right now, and I'm going to his lacrosse games. I'm I'm on the PA doing the announcing and having a great time, and never stop growing. Make sure you share the wealth, set the bar high, because I tell people that's one of the things I got out of the Wharton School, because Vanderbilt, I'm very proud of having gone there, but the big difference for me when I went up to the Wharton School is, these are people that are, well, Donald Trump, our presidents went to the Wharton School, so it's, you come to realize these are people that are all up on Wall Street, and as a kid from Kentucky, like probably most of you all around here, I would go up there and I think I'm gonna do X in my career, and you're surrounded by all these people that think they're gonna do 10 or 100X, and you realize I'm just as smart as they are. It's just setting the goal of what you want to do and going for it. And that's I really attribute, when I think about Wharton, for me, is it's not that I learned anything different than I probably learned here in the business school at U of L. It's just you're surrounded by people that have these high expectations, and you realize you're as smart as them, and if they can do it, you can do it too, and you just do it. So, with that, let me talk a little bit about what I wanted, at least when I ended up selecting an attorney, what I expected of them. I will say I interviewed 2 or 3 of them. Ultimately, I did select Bill Strench. I was looking for somebody with startup experience. I wanted them to be real cognizant that I didn't have a lot of money. There are attorneys that will paper things to death and run up bills, and you might make short-term money, but that's not how you're going to make a long-term client, if you're talking about that. And in the case of Bill Strench, he was really great for me. He actually helped coach me on things. We were very cost-effective for perspective. When I was even putting together my first PPM to save money, put a PPM together, it would have charged $20,000 or $25,000, and he had recently done one for Texas Roadhouse, which Ken Taylor was a friend of mine at the time, and he gave me his PPM, and I told Bill, I said, if I take that PPM and basically rewrite it, will you just clean it up? And he said yes, and so instead of costing me $25,000, it cost me $5,000. Well, when you're in a startup mode, and that makes a big difference in your loyal to people to take care of you like that. And he's also provided in addition to startup work, he's provided solutions to unique business problems, because where I was initially an 80% owner, as you can imagine, when I had to raise $40 million, I have to take some dilutions where I was going to be dropping down below 50%. He was able to help me come up with a new class of stock, which I could have super majority voting powers and things like that I would not have known about at the time. And he's also been a valued member of my advisory board now since its inception, and I can't say enough good things about him. So anyway, that's I realize I'm 20 minutes ahead, but that's kind of my little story, and I'd say hopefully that was helpful. But if y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
How does the future look, Brett?
Well, we're dealing with the market's changed, and I'm having to, I've come to recognize that we are not going to be able to be a company. Where I had set an objective of being a company that can grow to $1 billion and have all these things, I realized, we're not at that scale, and we can't fight the insurance companies. And instead of going after broad products that might have a broad therapeutic use in the marketplace, we're going to have to go for highly niche, ultra orphan indications where we're going to have, frankly, more leverage against the payers, and where they were going to be in a situation where they'll have to cover these things. And I mentioned the hemophilia drug. I'll tell you, we're actually close to working a deal where, and I won't get into all the details, but there's a very unusual situation where there's a pediatric oncology product where for the lack of patents, no other big company is going to go after it. And actually one company tried to go after it, but they tried to do some unethical things, and it really scared them off. And we're in a unique position where I think we're going to be able to pick up this drug, and we think we've got a shot at getting this thing approved with no clinical trials, and potentially with as little as $4 or $5 million worth of what's called CMC manufacturing work. But to be able to get a drug approved like that may only have 7 years of exclusivity, but it could help a large number of pediatric cancer patients that otherwise could be dying, and when you're talking about saving lives. And You know, it may not be $1 billion drug, but it might could be a $50 to $100 million drug, and those will be niche things that we're going to be looking at.
But on the opioid treatment, that's Lucimera, right?
Lucimera, yes.
Lucimera. It seems like with all the press that the opioid crisis has created with Dreamland, a very popular book that's come out treating the crisis, which is largely centered here in Kentucky and Southern Ohio, and Portsmouth, that whole area over there near Ashland. It's amazing that you wouldn't get Medicaid, Medicare coverage pretty quickly of a drug like this.
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example, a perfect example, this clonidine drug, which there is no medical, I mean, there's some papers that have been written, but nothing on the dose. Clonidine, since it's so far off label, it's, a script of clonidine is like under $10. And when we went out to California's Medicaid and tried to see about getting covered, you know, we offered a substantial discount, I think like maybe 50% off our price. They expected a 92% discount off the price, which wouldn't even cover cost of goods because of clonidine's price, even though nobody's using clonidine, or a very, very minute percent of the population that's even using it. These are highly specialized people that have had experience, but when you've got millions of patients that could potentially use it, you need to have broad reach out there, and you need to be able to give it to a physician that says, and in our particular case, you take 3 pills 4 times a day for 7 to 14 days, and you can make it through. And you can't do that with clonidine, but California doesn't care. So yeah, we're having to work through and make that happen. And I will say that there are some movements up in Washington where I'm told that there's a bill that's going to be coming through maybe sometime this year that would say by, I think, January of 2021, any drug that's approved to treat an opioid addiction has to be covered by everybody. So then we could go to Humana, and if they don't do it, then I'll turn them into the OIG, and I'll let them then go after Humana, like, you know,
Do our
like they
senators
came
help
after
with
us.
that process for you?
No, they have not been able to. But I will say, when the OIG thing came up, that was, I mean, I felt so violated there that I literally hired a lobbyist. I did call on our senators, and I went and met with chief of staff of both senators, and I met with 5 different chiefs of staff of 5 different congressmen people. But basically, they said, even if you're absolutely innocent, when the OIG is involved, we can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So, got me a lot of nothing. Anyway, your question.
Yeah, I had a question about kind of the changing prescribing practices of doctors and that shifting, how that looks for pharmaceutical companies in general. Just because there's like, with the opioid epidemics, there's much stricter controls on not only the drugs themselves, but the physicians license or prescribing the drugs. And I was wondering how that affects your business model or what you guys look for.
Well, it hasn't affected us at all in the opioid. I mean, we sell no opioids.
No controlled substances.
No controlled substances at all, and so it doesn't affect us at all. And you know, the government is going after everybody. Where, I mean, it's like they're trying to take the drugs out of the market, but I don't know. This is my opinion as opposed to fact, so I can't say it. It's absolutely true, but my sense is, yes, going after physicians that are illegally, that are writing thousands of scripts, and I mean, they have these pill mills. I mean, we know some physicians that have set up these Suboxone clinics where, well, I don't mind. I mean, it's just amazing. If y'all know what Suboxone is, it's like a form
Suboxone?
Suboxone, it's a form of, I guess it's buprenorphine, it's a form of an opioid, and the good news about Suboxone or buprenorphine is that it gives you the high of like a heroin or these opioids, but you can't overdose and die. It's been designed in a way that you don't die. And the government has viewed that this is the savior, that you take them off an opioid where you can die and you put them on buprenorphine or Suboxone. The problem though is you've just substituted one opioid for another. And to do this, you have to have these special licenses, and these Suboxone clinics have been developed. And I happen to know one physician who caught wind and understood the opportunity, and he actually created a business where I think he has like 100 or 200 physicians working with them, and they're essentially, they're pill mills.
They're pain clinics, is that what
They're pain clinics, and these one guys, they are charging, what they're doing is they're charging, I think, $250 to come in and give a script. And then typically what they're doing is they're writing a script for 2 to 3 times what the patient really needs. So they go out and they fill the full prescription, they only need, and they don't, most of these people don't have the money, they fill the prescription for the one that they need, and then they sell the other 2 to basically pay for the visit. And they are running so many patients through, each physician can only see, I think, 300 patients, maybe it's up to 350. But they bring them in and they turn them so fast that they literally, this one physician I know literally took the door off the exam room because it was taking him more time to write the script for $250 than it did to open and shut the door twice. And that's part of the problem that we're dealing with. And I think, yeah, they may try to put some of these people out, I mean, and that's for a legal one, but there are people that are writing those scripts for OxyContins. And those are the people they're trying to put in jail. The problem, though, is you take that source out, and these people are still addicted. They're going to go on something, and they're going to end up going out on the street and buying heroin unless you treat the underlying problem, which is getting them off a non-narcotic alternative, which is where us, Lucimera, combined with the ideal thing would be to have us partnered up with Vivitrol. Vivitrol is a drug that if you give them, the beauty of Vivitrol is if you get Vivitrol in a patient, and you give them a hit of heroin or any type of opiate, they don't get the withdrawal. They don't get the high and they don't get the withdrawal effects. The problem is if you give them Vivitrol before they're fully detoxed, it sends them into overdrive of withdrawal symptoms, like a 10 times, it's like a factor of 3 how bad your withdrawal symptoms are going to be. So the ideal situation would be if we could do something where the government pushes people more to like a Lucimera combined with a Vivitrol, to get them off the drugs as opposed to moving them from heroin or OxyContin over to
So Lucimera does the detox.
It does a detox, and it doesn't keep them off, but it gets them through withdrawal. It can enable somebody to either put them into therapy or put them on Vivitrol and put them on the road to
So
hopefully be
Vivitrol
healthier.
gets rid of the desire.
No, it doesn't get rid of the desire. They still may have the desire, but Vivitrol, if you're on Vivitrol and you get a shot of heroin, you don't get your high. You don't get your high,
So
and you
it
don't
doesn't
get your
pay
low.
off.
Doesn't pay off. And you give a shot of Vivitrol, it lasts for 30 days. I think that's right. I think it's 30 days. So, any other questions?
Brett, thanks again for
Okay.
that.
Okay.
I'm not sure where Tommy's in the Caribbean somewhere.
Yes.
Go to mine like later tonight. She's a gym warrior.